By the end of a single deployment, the average EOD technician would walk toward 200 live bombs, knowing their suit only offered the illusion of safety. More than 90% made it home, but nearly half lost the ability to sleep, to trust, or to live normally. The true horror behind The Walking Dead was never the kill rate, it was survival itself and what it cost. Here is how that nightmare began. Every EOD mission began with a hard line drawn between life and death. That line was the suit, EOD 9, 80 pounds of Kevlar, steel, and wishful thinking. Technicians stepped into it one piece at a time, boots reinforced to stop shrapnel, thick gloves that made hands clumsy, chest and groin plates heavy enough to bruise the ribs. The helmet alone weighed nearly 15 pounds, pressing down on the neck, its blast visor fogging with each breath. Cooling tubes snaked under the layers, but in the desert heat, sweat pooled and vision blurred. The entire suit was rated to protect against 5 pounds of C4 detonated 2 meters away. On paper. In reality, the suit was built for fragments, not the full force of a blast. The gear offered a promise of protection, not a guarantee. The weight slowed every step, made it hard to kneel and harder to run. Crawling was nearly impossible. Even with all this armor, technicians knew a direct hit would turn the suit into a coffin, but there was no other option. The job was to walk into the kill zone, stand over a device designed to kill, and trust that 80 pounds of gear would hold back everything that mattered. The suit became a ritual, a last comfort. It separated the technician from the world, from fear, from the knowledge that protection was never guaranteed. Every mission began with that weight, physical, psychological, and unspoken. Before the robot, before the tools, before the countdown, it was the suit that defined the boundary between what could be survived and what could not. Packbot and Talon robots rolled out first, their treads grinding over gravel and trash, arms reaching for wires or buried metal. On paper, these machines were the shield, remote eyes and hands to keep a human out of the blast zone. But in Iraq and Afghanistan, the desert heat and dust, tangled rebar, and hidden tripwires turned theory into gamble. Nearly 40% of the time, the robot stalled, flipped, lost signal, or simply could not reach the device. When the machine failed, the only option left was a human in the suit. The technician stepped out, dropped at a distance, sometimes 300 meters from the suspected bomb. That stretch of open ground became the fatal funnel. Every step forward was measured against the blast radius, the distance to cover if things went wrong, the possibility of a second device waiting for movement. The world shrank to the sound of boots on dirt, the hiss of breath inside the helmet, the knowledge that someone might be watching through a scope. At the point of no return, everything compressed. Army EOD technicians called it the 7-second window. That was the time. 7 to 15 seconds to decide, is this a pressure plate, a command wire, or something new? Is there a secondary device? Do you use the disruptor, or go in by hand? One mistake in those seconds meant death, not just for the technician, but for anyone in the blast shadow. As one Army EOD veteran put it, you do the math in your head, and then you move. You do not get to pause. If you are lucky, you walk back. If not, someone else finishes the job. Improvised explosive devices came in 7 main forms, each engineered to defeat whatever explosive ordnance disposal, EOD, had learned the day before. The most common was the victim-operated IED. A pressure plate was buried under dirt or hidden beneath trash, waiting for the weight of a boot or a tire to close a circuit. Command wire devices ran a thin cable from the bomb to a hidden observer with a battery. That observer could detonate the device manually, often as soon as a technician got close. Radio-controlled IEDs used cell phones, garage door openers, or cheap walkie-talkies. These could be triggered from blocks away, unpredictable and effectively immune to distance. Infrared beam triggers set off the device when an invisible beam was broken, nearly impossible to spot in sunlight. Crush wires, thinner than a pencil lead, were stretched across the road. Pressure snapped them, completing the circuit. House-borne IEDs turned entire buildings into traps, with explosives wired to doors, windows, or even ceiling fans. Vehicle-borne IEDs packed hundreds of pounds of explosives into a car or truck. Sometimes they were driven by a suicide bomber. Sometimes they were parked and abandoned. Anti-tamper switches became common as EOD adapted. Some bombs armed themselves when lifted, tilted, or even touched. Daisy chains linked multiple devices together, so disarming one triggered the rest. Clearing a single IED could reveal 3 more, each with its own trick. No single approach worked twice in a row. Every device was a new puzzle. Every response a race against an enemy who watched, learned, and rewired faster than any manual could keep up. The only constant was uncertainty. The technician's job was to survive the unknown, one trigger at a time. In Iraq and Afghanistan, the enemy's bombs didn't just multiply, they evolved. In 2004, most improvised explosive devices were crude, artillery shells wired to a battery, pressure plates buried under dirt, daisy chains linking several blasts together. By 2005, cell phones and garage door openers turned bombs into wireless threats. A technician could be killed from blocks away by a signal no jammer could catch in time. In 2006, armor-piercing explosively formed penetrators tore through even the newest tanks. These explosively formed penetrators were first seen in Sadr City. They reshaped the battlefield overnight. No vehicle was safe. By 2007, deep-buried improvised explosive devices packed more than 200 pounds of explosives 6 feet underground, triggered by pressure plates or magnets. Blast waves could kill at 50 meters. In 2010, magnetic anti-handling switches and jam-resistant remote detonators forced explosive ordnance disposal technicians to treat every pile of trash, every roadside animal, as a potential trap. Each year brought a new device, a new way to kill. The pace was relentless. Insurgents studied every countermeasure, rewired their bombs, and forced technicians to relearn survival week after week. For explosive ordnance disposal technicians, adaptation was not an advantage. It was a race they could never win. Route Irish, Baghdad's airport road, was the deadliest stretch of asphalt for explosive ordnance disposal teams in Iraq. Every day technicians drove it knowing that somewhere ahead, a bomb waited. Over the course of the war, explosive ordnance disposal teams cleared more than 40,000 improvised explosive devices in Iraq alone. Each device, by military estimates, meant 3 to 5 lives saved, convoys that made it through, families never notified. The math was simple. The cost was not. For every bomb defused, the enemy planted more. Insurgents watched and adapted, turning the road into a laboratory of violence. Casualty logs tell the other side of the story. 314 explosive ordnance disposal technicians killed in action, over 2,400 wounded. Yet those numbers barely hint at the real toll. As one military researcher explains, the paradox of explosive ordnance disposal success is that effectiveness guaranteed exposure. The more bombs you cleared, the more times you walked into the blast radius, the higher the odds that trauma followed you home. In the end, operational victory was measured not just in improvised explosive devices cleared, but in the silent, accumulating burden each technician carried back from the field. Half the candidates who walked into EOD school never made it to graduation. Instructors called it the longest 9 months in the military. Over 50 graded tests, each one a pass-fail gauntlet. Some washed out on the first day, hands shaking as they tried to wire a circuit under pressure. Others lasted until the live ordnance phase, where a single mistake meant a controlled explosion and a ticket home. For those who survived training, the job itself became a second test. In Iraq and Afghanistan, the pace broke down even the best. The average EOD career shrank to 6 or 8 years, less than half of what it had been in peacetime. By 2015, 40% of technicians left the field on medical retirement, most with a diagnosis that couldn't be seen on an X-ray. One instructor described the cost bluntly. "We don't lose people to the bombs. We lose them to what the bombs do to their mind." The worst failures weren't in the classroom or the field. They happened quietly, when a technician who had survived hundreds of missions simply couldn't face another day in the sweat. Today, nearly half of EOD veterans still battle invisible wounds. This is proof that modern warfare can destroy the mind without breaking the body. As conflicts evolve, so do their human costs. How we treat those who return will define what kind of war we are truly fighting. Share your thoughts below.